It's been 5 days since a mistrial has been declared in the Michael Slager case. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with Pastor Thomas Dixon. Pastor Dixon.
How we doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
I'm doing wonderful.
You know, as I was over here at this particular location, I was thinking to myself, what got us from a Michael Slager mistrial to really the jury foreman actually having a charge dropped during the actual trial?
You know, when it comes to our judicial system, when it comes to our law enforcement system, when it comes to our government operation, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes things that the general public is not privy to. Be there deals being made that affect the public, compromises and conditions put in place that affect the outcome of situations. This is traditionally the way America has operated in the past. I don't know the specifics of what happened with this jury foreman.
Okay.
I believe that I don't believe that there's any restrictions as far as him serving on the jury because his charges were pending. One thing about America is unless you've been to court, then you're supposedly innocent until proven guilty, supposedly. So I don't know if that would preempt him from serving. But the fact that these charges were dropped, that's problematic. That is truly problematic. And I know of some people who witnessed his arrest on those charges. And basically, he was cuffed and walked off out of the building or whatever. But we have to get to a point where our government officials, our judicial officials, our law enforcement officials all understand that the people are going to demand transparency. If this was a part of what was happening, the people should have known up front about the pending charges, and especially that there were charges being dropped from him, and with an explanation as to why. And I do believe that, even right now, I don't believe that there's been any statement issued saying as to why the charges were dropped.
Even with when, I'm sure, after Monday, you guys basically, well, the National Action Network and the coalition basically says, hey, we want an immediate retrial.
Yes, that was, yes. That statement was just released as of yesterday.
Right.
Mm-hmm. As you know, I think you know that we protested when Scarlett Wilson first took on this case, as far as her ability to try this fairly in the eyes of the community, based on her track record. She's never had a conviction, and never actually pursued a conviction when it came to officer-involved shootings. And I do believe that had this video that my hero, Quintin Santana, shot, had that not been available, then right now Michael Slager would be back on the streets as a law enforcement officer with the potential to do the same thing that he did to Walter Scott, to any other person out here on the street. But we didn't trust her prosecuting this case anyway. Now, it's been said by the family in particular, and I've even made the statement, that she did a good job. But then all of a sudden these other nuances start surfacing, like the dropping of the charges for the jury foreman. And there are other things. And it brings doubt. When we talk about cases with reasonable doubt, well, these things bring reasonable doubt as to her ability to prosecute these cases. So I don't know. It's time to get right. And an immediate retrial would be the best, but of course they're going to play the date game and all of that. And really the people should have had justice last Monday, not have to wait on justice anymore.
And let me take you back to Monday.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, and the next day, the Post and Courier had a headline that basically says deadlock. Mm-hmm. If you were to rewrite that headline, what would you say?
Wow, you got a harder question for me? Well, one word title.
You can go for it, or you know.
Injustice, with several exclamation points after. You know, it doesn't make sense. Around the world, people saw this video.
Right.
The video was very clear. The video showed a law enforcement officer, didn't necessarily show him in the scuffle, in the heat of a scuffle, but it did show him after the person that he was in the scuffle with turned his back and ran. Before the first shot was fired, this person was 18 feet away when the first shot was fired at his back. Now, that in itself, to me, shows malicious intent. He saw the sole of this person's foot running away from him. He saw the back of this person running away from him. To draw his service revolver at that time tells me that he intended, and then fire that shot at 18 feet. He intended to do bodily harm to this person. So that in itself shows malicious intent. But if we take it one step further, and 7 more shots later, 7 shots hitting Walter Scott 5 times in his back as he fled from him. We go from not only malicious intent, but we go to murder. There was no fear, there was no threat. Walter Scott was unarmed. He was fleeing from him. He was anywhere from 18 plus feet away from him. For this officer to shoot him like that, that was murder. It was premeditated. It was malicious. And for a jury of 12 people to watch that video and come up with anything other than murder, I would have accepted a 30-year sentence on manslaughter. But murder was what it was, and murder should have been the conviction.
The jury, as you know, even last week, Friday up until Monday, they had very difficult time that is, really defining the definition between fear and passion. What is your definition of fear and what is your definition of passion?
Fear. Let's go with fear first. Fear is if I'm actively engaged in a situation where my life could be compromised, my health, or anything that is involving me personally can be compromised. In the case of the confrontation between Slager and Walter Scott, there might have been fear during the scuffle on both sides, Slager and Walter Scott's, during the scuffle. But once the scuffle was ended and the party ran away, Slager's allegation of fear ended then. Ended it. I've never been afraid of somebody that ran away from me unless I thought they were coming back. And why would a man that was unarmed who's running away turn around and come back to the person that's armed? Doesn't make sense to me. So when it comes to the fear aspect of it, on on Michael Slager's behalf, there should have been no fear. There was no reason to fear. The fear was taken out of it. If he encountered a lion out on the street and the lion ran away from him and was going to continue to run away from him unless that lion turned around and come back, there had been no reason to fire. Fear taken away from it. Now let's look at passion.
Okay.
Passion. Passion comes in different forms. Passion can be exhibited positively, but also negatively. Passion could be the result, I think, as Andy Slager talked about, is if Andy Savage talked about. I have a hard time differentiating between the two. That's my own joke. But I think he described it something like catching a spouse in bed or something like that. That type of that heat of passion. But there's another aspect to passion also. There's a passion that comes from an altercation between two people, where, especially in the eyes of the person that feels they have the upper hand, and they lose the fight. For some reason or other, the lesser of the two, in one person's mind, the person that feels like he should win, the lesser of the two has won. Now I'm passionately upset at this person because this person got the best of me, and because of that passion, I'm going to ensure that I get them back. That's a different kind of passion. It's still passion, but the outcome is different. Walter Scott got the best of this law enforcement officer in a scuffle, where this law enforcement officer might have thought, man, shoot, I'll handle this dude. No problem. You know, I'm trained. I got gun. I got tasers. I got backup coming. I don't even think backup was coming at that time. But he has all of these mechanisms in his mind, the mind of law enforcement. You know, we are the, you know, we're the soldiers. And here this guy is running away from me. He already knew he's a 50-year-old man. You know, what other conditions about him, he had no idea. But he had reason to believe in his mind, Slager did, I believe, that he could have bested him. But instead, Walter Scott put a little something on him and managed to get away from him, even with the taser being deployed, and to run off. Now here comes pride and arrogance, the entrance of pride and arrogance that fueled this passion. It said, this person, I can't say what I might have said.
Okay.
This person that got away from me, I'm going to fix him. And we see, as Walter Slager ran away, as Walter Scott ran away, Michael Slager, we see him draw his pistol, level that pistol and squeeze off 8 rounds after fleeing Walter Scott. Because of his passion, because he passionately felt that this guy had gotten the best of him and he wasn't going to let him get away with it.
Let me turn to the family. As you know, you were at the press conference. I was at the press conference on Monday afternoon. And Judy Scott basically said, hey, it's not open until God says it's over.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to sit down with her one-on-one, just you and her, once again, what else would you say to her?
I would tell Mrs. Scott that it's not over until God says it's over. But for me, as a man of God and a soldier on the battlefield of justice, in the face of the injustice that her son and her family have had to deal with now for 19 months, an injustice that should have been addressed within 90 days of the murder. Slager should have been in prison for the rest of his life, at least a year now.
Okay.
But I would tell her, Mrs. Scott, don't worry. Because I, for one, will not let this rest until this man is convicted and sentenced to prison for the rest of his natural life. And I will use every resource that I have in order to make sure that this conviction happens. Because I have never allowed myself to see one thing and not believe what my eyes told me. I know about magic tricks, but that wasn't a magic trick on April 4th, 2015 at 9:38. That was reality. The video was reality. And can't nobody tell me that that video is something different than what it shows. It shows murder with clear intent, malice, premeditation by definition. And I would tell Mrs. Scott, and I think Mrs. Scott knows this, that as Pastor Dixon, as somebody that's been on this social justice battlefield for a long time and standing up for people in this community and further, that I'll do everything within my power in order to assure that her son's death is not in vain, and that others will not fall victim to the same thing, the horrible death that he had to endure, and the horrible death that they've had to endure time and time again since this happened, which is something else that I have to push for, these speedy trials. It's a darn shame, and I'm going to put it out there just like that. It's a darn shame that this judicial system will continue month after month after month after this happens to draw that family back in, and they have to relive the death of their loved one, the wrongful death of their loved one, month after month after time, and now they've been to court, and guess what? They got to do it again. They got to see the pictures, the autopsies, hear the testimony. It's wrong for them to do Fade and Santown about that. It's wrong. And so I would tell her. And I'm gonna call myself something because humility doesn't allow me to really say statements like this, but I'm going to call myself. I'm a drum major for justice, as Dr. King said. And justice has not been seen in this case for the victim, who was Walter Scott, or for the Scott family. And for Mrs. Judy Scott, for Walter Sr.,
Right.
for Anthony,
Right.
for Rodney, I will continue to not only be there for them, but to do everything within my power in order to ensure that justice is served in this case and that legislation changes in order to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Let me walk you across the street to the roof trial.
Mhm.
As you know, it's been a lot of powerful testimonies from one of the survivors as well as the law enforcement officials. And then, of course, you have the shooter. He basically, initially, he was incompetent. They had the mental evaluation whether or not he would be competent or incompetent in stand trial. And of course, he tried to get the mistrial. He tried to get a delay. What is going on with him?
This guy is very manipulative. This is my my take on it. This guy is not. He doesn't have any diminished capacity. I think he's very intelligent. I think even though his educational status might not say that,
Right.
but I think he's very intelligent and very knowledgeable of what he's doing. A lot of what he's doing is calculated. I believe he decided to represent himself because it took him from a different position within the courtroom where the survivors and the family members are. It took him from sitting there and being a casual observer with his lawyers doing the talking and addressing them, to him directly addressing the survivors that are in the courtroom, mockingly. If you look at the video of his confession and how he laughed at certain points and sneered, this kid is nasty, and he's the product of nastiness. There's the hatred that's in America that has bred him, that he was birthed from. And of course, as they say, that apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so he's not an isolated incident. There are more Dylan Roofs out here. And there are more who are breeding more Dylan Roofs out here. So we need to look at him just as he is. His position in that courtroom,
Right.
and the antics that he's pulling, I believe, are calculated. But he was smart enough to say, well, I don't need my lawyers, but when it comes to that phase about me, whether I'm going to die or not, I need to have them back in here, I need somebody to speak up on my behalf. Yeah.
Pastor Thomas Dixon, as always, thank you so much.
Quintin, thank you.
I appreciate it.
I really appreciate you and all the work you do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.